morning, everybody. Sarah McVicker back again. This is video number 7 today in the group of now 8. And it'll really be 8. And these videos are intended to give some heads up and some points and questions and things you might be interested in a workshop that I'll be teaching in the fall. And I thought in this video I needed to go a little further ahead on probably the most important aspect of trauma talks, and that is how we actually heal it. And I need to, 1 to 6 was of course about the identification and the symptoms and those kinds of things as they played out in my story, in my life. And in the healing part, in videos 7 and 8, I'll be talking about how I had to begin with healing in my life. And of course that might be different from your experience because our trauma is based in different things, and therefore what we have to do to heal it might be different. But today we'll be talking about the healing aspect, and I expect my cousin Lighthouse Mary to arrive with some more questions. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You get situated here. So we're back together again for another video.
Yes, we're back together again. Happy to see you.
Yeah. I was hoping we would continue with a couple of more videos because I had so many questions after you left me on a cliffhanger in video 6. And in 2007, your 34-year marriage ended. In 2008, you left Canada for Spain.
Yes.
And in 2009, you found yourself on the bottom rung of the ladder and you had to face the fact that you were alcoholic.
Yes. Yeah. It was 3 years of just gargantuan kind of adjustment
Yes.
that I had to make in my life. And as I had talked about in the last video, Mary, I wasn't really consciously aware at the time of each of those things being as massive as they were. But the fact that they all came together, well, of course they're going to be that way. Yes, I left Nova Scotia for Madrid in 2008 to, innocently take a course of teaching English as a foreign language. And I thought I might use that skill in Halifax when I returned. But it turned out to be, I wound up teaching business English there and was there for 6 years. And in 2009, I was certainly becoming aware that my alcoholism it became something I had to recognize as such. Up to that point, you must understand, and people in that situation certainly understand, that there comes a time in that process where it's the drinking becomes hidden, and it becomes daily and pretty much antisocial at the end. It's not a pleasant time in a person's life. So that's what happened in 2009. Even though I was teaching, even though I was up every day doing that same work, the reality was that I had to do something about the drinking. I would like to, if you don't mind.
I'm going to read a little bit from your book.
I think I would like to. You probably remember the little part in chapter 5 called Accepting Alcoholism in Madrid, Spain. And I thought I would read you a little bit about exactly what the beginning of that process was like. And the person that you'll hear me refer to in that chapter, my sweet friend Paco, was an adult student of mine at the time, who invited me into his family and his life, and he was so kind, and he was very instrumental in my beginning this process of dealing with alcoholism. So here we go. The chapter starts with an interesting quote, one that I think is actually funny. An alcoholic is someone you don't like who drinks as much as you do.
Mm-hmm.
This is by a famous author, Dylan Thomas.
Makes you think?
It does, yeah. Kind of funny. Dylan Thomas must have had a sense of humor. The day finally arrived that began, like every other day, looking in the mirror at 5 a.m. The face that looked back was drenched in self-loathing for no particular reason other than I had done it yet again. I was drunk going to bed. And who did I email? That first early morning look in the mirror, blindly reeling and still having to fix that mess reflected back to me, was one more of hundreds of days just like it. But on this day, November 12th, 2009, I knew I had to do something about it. The night before, I had emailed Paco, drunk, crying, and beside myself. I told him that I thought I had a drinking problem. I remember how kind he was. He wrote to me if I had ever checked out AA. I told him that months ago I had filled out an online form that asked several questions to check out if alcohol might be a problem. I think it said that answering yes to a small number of 3 or 4 of the questions, a person may be heading toward an addiction to alcohol. I didn't tell him that I could have answered yes to every point on the sheet. And here I was, looking in the mirror, and I had a class with Paco in 3 hours. People who know me well would know the crucifixion it would have been for me to face someone in circumstances like that, the day after, and very sick. I was always in such a state of self-loathing as a drinker, while drinking and post-drinking, that most of the time I would just suffer it out until I proceeded to numb out again the next day in exactly the same way as always. But this email to Paco let the cat out of the bag. I did not confide in him in a mature, healthy way, the way one would to a friend. Instead, it was a less than courageous way, I felt, to do so drunk and via email. But actually, in all the years since then, I recall this event as being the real beginning of my recovery, because I had never reached out to anyone before or admitted that I thought I had a problem with alcohol, at least to the degree that it was happening in 2009. Class that day began with a big hug from Paco, and the old soul that he is made me feel the way I imagined that people do who feel forgiven by a loved one. That feeling had never been on my landscape before nor since. So that was my true beginning of my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous in Madrid, 2009. I think of Paco as mi ángel de español, my Spanish angel.
Thank you for reading that, Sarah.
You're welcome.
That's, very interesting. And I can't imagine how hard that process was facing your student the next day.
Oh, it was brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were the main driving forces that brought you to finding that first AA meeting in Madrid?
Well, I would say that there were 2. If I think about it, there was probably tons, but the 2 that come to my mind was, first, I had a really debilitating self-loathing as a drinker. I really hated myself as a drinker. And remember, that wasn't just then, that was always. And I think, Mary, that must have come from the family culture I was brought up in. There was no alcohol. And any reference to alcohol in my family was interpreted by me as something that was not approved of. So there was something bad about it that I picked up as a child. And we used to have visitors, people that would come visiting the house that would have been 3 sheets to the wind, like they say, wanting to have a fiddle session or whatever. And my mom's door was never closed to those people. But I always remember an underlying knowledge that that was okay if it was anybody else. It was not going to be for us. And even though at that time of my life, with my mom passed away, my family everywhere, me as an adult at the end of a long teaching career, and this was sort of an add-on, I still felt that judgment, I guess, except it was self-judgment at this time. Yeah. I was ashamed of being an uncontrolled drinker.
Yes.
I felt shame over that from day one. And I'd say the second thing, Mary, would be that I knew that I couldn't heal as the kind of drinker that I was. Because you might recall in the previous video, when I drank, I didn't stop until I had to. Whether that was having to go to bed because in order to get up for work in the morning, whatever it was, I was only able to control it to that degree at that point. If I had to be in bed at 9 o'clock because I had to be on a train at 6 a.m., I was still able to do that, thank God. But I would drink as much as I wanted between 3 o'clock and 9 that night. So knowing that what I was like during that process, I knew that I couldn't heal like that. There was just too much self-loathing going on, lack of control, all of those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can see that, and there was certainly no happiness in that.
Oh God, no. No.
Why did you see stopping drinking as being necessary in order for you to begin to heal? Well, why did you have to stop drinking to do that?
I guess it's the way I was when I drank. That I was aware of the way I was when I drank. That would be one thing. Drinking changed me. It changes some people and it doesn't change others to a great degree. It's just the way people are wired, I guess. But it changed me, and over the years I noticed there was a halting of emotional development that drinking is now, the research tells us that drinking is associated with that. It can cause a person, when you start drinking alcoholically that is, it can cause a person to cease to mature emotionally. So there was that sense of being unable to grow as a person when I was drinking. And of course the self-hatred, and along with that, the drinking lowers the inhibitions, of course, and during that time, all of the anger and all of the negativity that was inside me after all of these years of just feeling, less than everyone else and just emotionally traumatized, I think all of those years, all of this would be a part of the drinking experience. There was absolutely no way that I felt that I could heal in that. I just couldn't. I knew that I couldn't.
It certainly seems like there's a lot more to this than meets the eye.
Oh my heavens, yes.
And besides not putting alcohol into your body, what else did you do to get started in healing?
Well, as I said earlier in my introduction to this video, everyone has to start in their own way. And for me, the drinking was number one. It had to stop.
Yes.
It had to stop for all of the reasons that we just talked about. And having taken the step to go to AA, I learned that AA being a 12-step program, these steps are important. It's really the only reason people go to AA. The steps teach us how to live a life without help from substances. It's facing life on life's terms, I guess you'd say. And each step builds on the next one. So by the time you get to 12, you've got quite a little education going there.
Yes.
That helps you to face the world, or makes you feel hopeful that you can face the world without going back to hiding, I guess, in the substance. Yeah, and of course I had the help of AA in that process. And finding a sponsor in AA is helpful. First of all, people aren't doing that right away. They're just listening and learning for the first long time, when learning what the steps are and so on. But the sponsor comes into the picture in being someone we're told to keep an eye out for. You know, when you're listening to other people sharing in an AA room, you get a sense of who's solid and whose program is working for them, and whose life you might want. You want to live in the way that this person has grown to live. So it was, it made sense.
It sure does make sense, and it's kind of like having a mentor.
Yeah.
So you dedicated yourself to that process.
I did. From I was determined, you know. I was determined because I think you know me well, Mary, and I would never have dragged myself ashamed and incredibly humiliated and sick and desperate. I would never have dragged myself up the street to a place I'd never been before, all by myself in a strange city, to go to AA if I didn't intend to take it seriously. That's just the way it worked, and that's the way it worked. I had to start trusting someone and something. And AA was that thing and the people in it. Yeah, and it worked for me.
And you began to feel hopeful.
I did. And you know, it's little things sometimes that, it's little things often that you need to do. It makes me think of teaching. Sometimes it's the little things that open people's eyes the widest, you know?
Yes.
For one thing, I had this idea of putting a chart on my wall and keeping track of every day that I didn't drink. And it was a calendar, basically, a big calendar of November 2009. And I gave myself a tick, of course, me and my checks. I gave myself a check for every day that I stayed sober, and another check for every meeting that I attended.
Yes.
Each month I did that for a long time. I don't know how many months I did that, but so I needed that visual. And I started to read the big book of AA. It's kind of the Bible of AA, and it's just a book that was written by the founders of AA. And of course it was in the 30s, so I mean, you know, you're going to see some references in there that aren't in the 21st century. But the gist, what's meant to be taken from that book, is that every alcoholic will eventually find themselves in that book. Somebody is going to tell a story. It's a book basically that's filled with other people's stories, and eventually you're going to see yourself in there.
Right.
You're going to be able to identify with some of the things that those people went through. We're just one of millions of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this has been fascinating, Sarah. Very, very interesting. And I think that's enough for today, and I'll have to come back for a little bit more. Okay?
Okay. You'll have to get it all in the next time.
Yes.
The last video,
I think
Mary.
we will. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're very welcome. Nice to see you again.